My last video before my surgery today, I wanted to talk about why I decided on a single mastectomy instead of a lumpectomy or a double mastectomy. Now, of course, everyone's body and everyone's circumstances and everyone's values are different. So this video is not to say what you should do if you're making the same decision. It's just a video that I'm putting out to bounce ideas off of in case there are elements that you haven't thought of yet. There certainly were elements that I hadn't thought of yet and questions that I had not thought to ask my doctors. And so I'm just putting this video out for ideas and information, absolutely not for medical advice or even personal advice. No advice here, just my story. So I have been on this journey, as you might have seen on former videos, for about 10 years overall, just continuing to scan and look for what was going on in my left breast. For the last year and a half, I started having symptoms. And so I've had a really long, drawn out, ideal situation in which I was able to take time and do hours and days of research to make my decision. So I realize that not everyone has that luxury, and I'm very grateful for it. It's still really hard to make the final decision and to go forward with the final decision, especially since it has been this gradual. But I have made a decision and I feel good about it. Originally, so I decided to have surgery after about a year of symptoms, and in June when I decided to have surgery, my goal was to have the least invasive, smallest surgery possible. And I had a number of surgeons that I saw, and I got different advice from each of them about the size that they would want to take out. And I also had an integrative oncology MD, who is a general practitioner, who was advising me about what he thought I should do. So I had lots and lots of good advice, wise people, good doctors, very well respected in the community where I live. And yet there were very differing advice. And my goal, again, was just to take the smallest lump out. So I was going to have a lumpectomy for the first couple of months of my planning. And then I saw another doctor. I actually saw her thinking that she would be my post-surgery doctor. She's a medical oncologist, so she is an oncology specialist. She's an MD, but she usually works with folks with regard to radiation and chemotherapy. And my question for her when I went in, my main question or curiosity was, if you are my medical oncologist, and she's an integrative doctor as well, but she's an MD, not a naturopath. If you are my medical oncologist after surgery and I get a lumpectomy, are you going to make me have radiation? Because I do not want to have radiation. There are a couple of really strong bottom lines for me, and this isn't true for everyone, but I did not want radiation. I've heard lots of stories, and I was just really trying to avoid that in my story. And so her answer for me was, no, if you have a lumpectomy, I am going to recommend radiation. That would be a strong recommendation. However, if you have a mastectomy, I will not. Now that didn't change my mind. I still wanted a lumpectomy, but she had some other things to share with me. She took 3 hours with me and heard my entire life story, all of my medical background, of which there is quite a bit. Nothing really major, but a lot of minor stuff and some low energy and chronic fatigue kinds of things. And she noticed that throughout my medical history, and especially through perimenopause during the last 10 years, I have been prone to grow polyps and fibroids and cysts like crazy. And she was guessing, before she even did the blood work, that I have a lot of insulin growth factor. And this is not something that most MDs or oncologists even look into, but this is something she's pretty passionate about and she's done a lot of research on. And this concept of growth factors or insulin growth factor really changed my plan and my surgery plan. She said that if I do have a lumpectomy, I'm taking the chance that if there is cancer hiding in my breast, and there's a 50-50 chance that there would be, that cancer would grow exponentially and I would have to have a second surgery probably right away. And that was not something anyone had told me at all. So that changed my perspective, that changed my thinking on the surgery and my priorities, and I pretty quickly changed my plan to mastectomy. And I asked her, well, I was going to have a lumpectomy and a reduction, so small chunk taken out of this breast and a small chunk taken out of this breast so that I could have symmetry. And I said, should I still have a reduction? Do you recommend a double mastectomy? And she said, and most doctors will not say this because they don't want to advise you. They want you to make the decision so that you don't have regrets or blame them. But she was really kind and took the chance to advise me and said, I would not touch your second breast. You do have some cysts in there. They are benign, but I don't think that you should take the chance to cut into that breast until there's an issue with it. And so she recommended a single mastectomy. And everything she said made so much sense to me, and I took her advice, and I am taking her advice and having surgery just in a few days. And I guess I also have to weigh my own values. One value I have is pain reduction. That's a big one for me. So I am going to have a lot of numbness, probably in my left breast, the mastectomy side. And I really value the idea that I will not have pain or numbness in my right side. Another thing that I value is symmetry, and I will not have symmetry. However, I will have a prosthetic breast that I will be able to wear out and about, and it will appear as though I have symmetry to the world at large. And so that's good, and that will be pretty manageable in terms of the right size and weight. And the technology is really advanced at this point, so I'm feeling pretty confident that that'll be a pretty smooth transition. I do have a Goldilocks mastectomy plan, so I will have a little bit more padding than a total mastectomy would provide. So instead of having kind of a concave effect, I will have more of a flat effect on my left side. And the flatness will help the prosthetic to stay in place as I'm wearing my prosthetic bra as well. So my circumstances, my situation are, of course unique, and yours are too. Some days I really just want to run kicking and screaming away from the surgery, and I wish that I didn't have to have it, but there are some consolations. So again, the consolation that my breasts will be around the same size when I'm out and about and when I look in the mirror with clothes on. I will still have feeling and sensation in my right breast, so I will be able to feel when I'm embracing someone or when I have cold or hot water running over me in the shower. I will be able to sense that, and I'm grateful for that. Mastectomy can be less recovery time even than a complicated lumpectomy like the one I would have had. So hopefully I'll have less pain and less recovery with my mastectomy. So that's a consolation. There's no guarantees for long-term pain. Of course, everyone's unique, and I'll do everything I can to do the pre-treatments that will help me to avoid chronic pain, of course. And right now there's not a whole lot of research that's been done on that, but there's a little bit. So I'll probably share that post-operatively. I'll share what I did in a video about that. So there are a few consolations. There were also a few consolations with my former plan for a lumpectomy. I actually was getting used to the idea of having smaller breasts, and I thought, well, it'll be nice to have smaller breasts in some ways because my breasts are quite large now and running is awkward no matter what kind of bra I have on. So I thought, well, that'll be nice. I'll have some more freedom of movement, perhaps. I'll also have a lack of a nipple. If I had had a lumpectomy, I would have lost my nipple. And there are benefits to not having a nipple. Not very many, but there's one that I can think of, as you can imagine, I'm sure, if you're a woman. That will still be true. I will still not have a nipple on my left side, so there is that little tiny benefit of that. However, I will on my right side, so it's not that big of a deal. But every plan, every option has its costs and its benefits. And what I've learned, the big things for me were just the chronic pain, the possibility of chronic pain with nerve damage. the possibility of necrosis, which is tissue death, if you should lose blood flow to an area. Now, I'm not going to have to deal with that at all because I'm having a mastectomy, so there won't be any areas to lose blood flow to, except maybe my skin, and necrosis is pretty unlikely with skin. So there's the pain, there's the blood flow, there's just the aesthetic appearance, which is what most people think of. There's the eventual numbness and maybe eventual lack of numbness. Numbness can go away with nerve damage, but usually with a mastectomy it doesn't. And then there's the idea of prosthetics or reconstruction. I have never had reconstruction in my plan at all. It's never been an option that I have entertained, but I may change my mind. I could possibly become open to it later on. The reason I have not entertained reconstruction or having a breast implant has been my reaction to the one thing that was placed in my breast, which is a tiny little chip of titanium as a marker in my first biopsy. In my second and third biopsies, I said no titanium because I had already had quite a bit of scar tissue and pain built up around my little marker. I've had no pain at all except for that. And so I'm very eager to get that out. I'm very happy that that will be being removed as a part of my mastectomy. And the reason that I don't want a breast implant is because I have had such a poor reaction to that foreign piece of metal being put into my breast. So I'm guessing that I would have a pretty poor reaction to an implant being placed into my breast. And another, probably the last thing I haven't mentioned yet, factor for me has been minimal numbers of anesthesia. So I don't have breast cancer running in my family, which is a factor for many women in terms of what they choose in terms of single or double mastectomy. But I do have dementia as a trait in my family, a very strong trait on one side of my family. And so anesthesias and number of anesthesias in your lifetime can be a factor when you're dealing with dementia and when you have a high risk of dementia. And so I want the fewest numbers of anesthesia as possible. So that's everything. Those are all the factors that went into my decision and that might go into your decision as well. And I would love to hear if I missed anything that you are considering as a factor. And feel free to comment below with that. If you'd like to follow my journey, I am doing daily diary entry, video entries on Instagram. And the address to that is a.breast.cancer.diary. And there are dots in between the words. So a.breast.cancer, a.breast.cancer.diary. And that's where I'm at, showing some of the more personal elements of my journey that I'm not showing here. So this is my last video, like I said, prior to surgery, and so I will see you all after my surgery. Talk to you then.